There you go. 4-punch, 5-punch, 6-punch combination. Body shot, bang, 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 bang.
Telling him not to counterpunch.
Boom! Will Rackman get up? Reloading!
Iron. You're going through all the instructions. This is for the championship of the world. I expect a tough, clean fight. Protect yourself at all times. Any questions from the challenger?
Welcome back, fight fans, to another exciting episode of the Fight City podcast. I'm your host, Alden Kodash. I'm joined by Jeff Fuss today. How are you today, Jeff?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks for having me, Alden.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of exciting fight news to cover in the wake of Teofimo Lopez's sudden cancellation due to COVID. A lot of people were a little disappointed this weekend of fights, but the event that took place on Saturday on 3 different networks really made up for it in some ways in a very surprising manner. So let's go to the first network. Let's go to DAZN, in which we probably had the most shocking outcome of anything on Saturday, and probably of anything of the year, as Gabriel Rosado scored a one-shot knockout over Bektamir Melikuziev, Beck the Bully, 7-0, 6 by knockouts, Olympic silver medalist, heavily heralded fighter. He was supposed to be fighting Sergey Kovalev earlier this year. He was going to fight Kovalev even after Kovalev popped positive for PEDs. He almost had Rosado out of there, and then one shot in the 4th round, and he was down face first. And all of a sudden, he is just an afterthought. So that is boxing. And what is your take of it?
I think this is a really good fight unfortunately, though, Beck, he suffered a KO loss to Gabriel Rosado. I think this was a better call for this fight in comparison to when he was willing to face Sergey Kovalev. Gabriel Rosado is an exciting fighter, albeit that last fight that he had with Daniel Jacobs. But he's a crafty, cagey veteran. So I think this fight lent that experience, even though he took a loss here, it lent that experience to Beck to be ready to take that next step in stepping up his competition. I just didn't, after seeing him suffer such a heavy hit, him fighting Sergey Kovalev, in hindsight, he's probably like, it's probably good that I didn't take that fight.
And even if he won that fight, Sergey Kovalev is faded, hasn't fought in a little while. It's not inconceivable that he would have won that fight. But even if he did, he would be right up there with the top at 175. And clearly, given some of the defensive flaws and the shot that laid him out by a 160-pounder, really, maybe a 168-pounder in Gabriel Rosado, he wouldn't be ready for that heat at the top of the 175-pound division. I think it's clear to see that. I was very surprised to see him even make 168. He was so broad, and it looked like he was so much bigger than Rosado in there, who's campaigned most of his career at 160 and wasn't a puncher there anyways, land that shot and knock him out. But, when you target so exclusively to the body as Beck the Bully does, and you do so with little abandon, it looked like he had no respect for Rosado's power, and it was just a perfectly landed shot that laid him out. So, that is what happens.
Yeah, every single punch that Beck landed, you could tell Rosado was like, I kind of don't want any part of this. He'd curl up real quick, throw maybe one punch, and maybe desperation just to push him off of him. But like you said, that one punch changed the fight. And Rosado, just watching him run to the corner screaming, so excited, like, dude, I just landed this punch. This is now going to get me set up for another big fight, another big payday. Because, he's at 35. He's probably closer to the end of his career. And he's been in such brutal competition with his professional career. So it's good to see him take this win. And, Beck he'll bounce back.
Yeah, I think Beck, that's to your point earlier, that's a setback that he might have needed. He was fighting guys that clearly weren't testing him to the level that Rosado would, and I think he was on the verge of biting off more than he can chew and maybe getting even more hurt against top guys at 168 or 175. He clearly was willing to take on a lot of risk. But Gabriel Rosado, he used to be everyone's favorite stepping stone, and now all of a sudden, he might be something else. He was calling out Jaime Munguia in the post-fight. Are guys going to be as eager to use him as a stepping stone, journeyman type fighter to pad their resumes as they were before?
That's a good question. Him taking out Beck in such just a one punch fashion like that, a well timed punch. I don't see it. I mean, Beck was considerably way bigger than him, but he is like David and Goliath, and he put Goliath down.
Yeah.
I would, if I was Jaime Munguia, I wouldn't take that fight.
Yeah, Jaime Munguia is a number one contender for Demetrius Andrade's WBO title, Jermall Charlo's WBC title. We'll talk about Munguia in a second here. But yeah, I mean, there are options that a guy like Munguia could take. There are options that a lot of other fighters can take because Gabriel Rosado, in addition to scoring that one punch knockout, he's a solid technical fighter as well. I mean, he's a lot of big fights he's been in. He's come up short in pretty close manner. He's always in great condition, and now he's very confident coming off these last two performances against Danny Jacobs. In his mind, he considers that a win, and if he would have gotten that decision, that would have been a huge step in his career as well, because certainly no one thought he was going to come up on top in that fight. But in the main event in El Paso, Texas, on DAZN's card, Jaime Munguia, he got a 6-round stoppage over Camille Zarameta, 1 round earlier than Triple G was able to force Zarameta to retire. Zarameta was a late substitute for Maciej Solinsky, but I thought Munguia looked pretty solid. I thought we're seeing a lot of development under the tutelage of Eric Morales. I think he's a much better fighter than he was at 154, defensively, offensively. I'm not sure if that's just because he's not killing himself to make 154, or if we're also seeing a lot of good technical development. But I'm beginning to become a fan of this kid.
Yeah, I was impressed with his performance. I mean, regardless that his opponent came in, he took this fight on 2 weeks notice.
Yeah, 2 weeks notice.
And that I'm sorry,
Zarameta was the fighter he fought.
Zarameta
was the fighter he replaced.
That's right. Zarameta, he's coming off a loss from GGG. So his performance, Jaime Munguia's performance here, very offensively sound, looking for roots to the body, throwing punches and bunches, was just too much for Zarameta. And I wouldn't say this was more of a showcase fight, saying that he doesn't need to cut down to 154 anymore. He seems comfortable at 160. Definitely offensively sound. I mean, we always knew he was offensively sound, but I really like the technical performance that he put on last night. So yeah. I'm curious to see what's next for this young fighter.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's stronger at 160 than he was at 154. I know he emerged on the scene when he was just so much bigger than Saddam Ali and just blew him out of there. But he was going the distance in a lot of fights that he probably shouldn't have at 154, and I think that's because he was starching himself to make the weight. Now I think he's really settling into his own. I don't think he should move up to 168 right away, as some people have been alluding to. I think there's a lot of good fights for him at 160, and I think he's primed to become a mandatory soon for, as I mentioned earlier, Demetrius Andrade's WBO title, Jermall Charlo's WBC title. We'll talk about Jermall Charlo a little bit in a bit, who also fought this weekend. But, there are a lot of big fights for him at 160, and, fights that he could conceivably win as well, especially with the rate of improvement he's showing with Eric Morales. So I do think he needs a couple more fights at 160, but probably doesn't have to do with a Gabriel Rosado type right now. I think he might be a step above that. That might be a distraction en route to some of the world championship fights that he is certainly willing to take and worthy of taking. But there's pretty big upside with this kid.
Yeah, I mean, him taking a fight with Rosado could be a distraction, or maybe even possibly a disruption, right? If Rosado is able to unseat and take away that O in his loss column. Because I know in the post-fight interview that he called out Charlo. He called out Jermall Charlo, said that he was willing to fight GGG. So, I mean, those are two big names in the 160 division. Is it possible that he could defeat either one? I think he would need to be at his best, but I don't think he's quite there yet.
Yeah. There's yep. He definitely is not fully primed. It doesn't look like he's peaking yet, but definitely a lot of improvement from Jaime Munguia, as shown in El Paso, Texas. Going to Houston, Texas, Showtime put on a triple header. We're going to talk about two of the biggest fights. Angelo Leo with his majority decision victory against Aaron Alameda, really extremely close, great crossroads fight at 122 pounds, one of the best divisions in boxing, both of them coming off respective losses to Stephen Fulton and Louis Neary. Angelo Leo eked out a victory. He looked very good in doing so in spots, but the 98-92 card by Eva Zaragoza really did the fight no justice, in my opinion.
I agree with you. I was questioning that card. I was wondering what fight were you watching, because it makes it sound like Almeida wasn't doing anything.
Yeah, he was landing some huge shots in the exchanges, some really solid shots. Looked like Angelo Leo was a little stronger in spots, especially early on, but Almeida really made his presence known in the later rounds, and he had Leo circling around him, and Leo is a guy that typically doesn't take a backward step, as seen against a guy like Tremaine Williams. Stephen Fulton had to force him to finally take that backward step, but Leo's a big guy for 122, and Alameda really made his presence known in there.
Yeah, I was rather, man, the output that Leo was putting out last night. Just the constant punches, the angles. It's just so much fun to watch this 122-pound division.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, especially given some of, not even the champions at 122. You got Danny Roman, Raiz Salim, Brandon Figueroa, who just became a champion recently, against Louis Neary. But these are some great fights for Angelo Leo and Aaron Alameda to take on at 122 pounds. I think the only guy that's pretty much a level above him that I could say definitively based on their fight was Stephen Fulton. But I could see a great fight between Angelo Leo and Danny Roman, or even if he fought a Brandon Figueroa. Raiz Salim might prove to be a level above him. I'm extremely impressed with this kid as well. But Angelo Leo's a solid fighter, but don't count out Aaron Alameda, who just narrowly came out short in their fight, despite what one of the judges had to say about it. Majority decision loss. In the main event, though, we had Jermall Charlo with his unanimous decision victory over Juan Montiel. Well, first of all, I don't know if I've ever seen such an entertaining near shutout performance before. I mean, this fight was really all over the place, despite the fact that it was hard to give rounds to Juan Montiel.
Yeah. Oh, I tweeted out at one point, throwing a couple dance moves, and Montiel will be the next Emmanuel Burton, because the way this guy was just like showing out a little bit, encouraging Charlo to come to him, and then taking such devastating punches, but then also at some point willing to throw back. Those body shots he was throwing, I was like, yo, he's throwing some heat. And Charlo ate him, but you could tell he staggered Charlo just a little bit at one point throughout the fight a couple of times. But still, Charlo, swept the cards. But Montiel was in it. I'd say he was in it the whole time. Like, this guy, at some point, you're wondering when Charlo's going to pull that final trigger, but it seems like he couldn't. Montiel is just a tough Mexican fighter. Yeah,
he took some horrendous punishment, especially in the middle rounds. I didn't think he was going to get out of there in some of those rounds. He was hurt several times. But he pulled it together, and he was the one coming forward towards the end of the fight. He was the one that had Jermall Charlo in a little bit of trouble in the 11th round, I thought, especially to the body. Charlo took a lot of big shots. I think it was noted that this was the first time he was cut in his career. His right eye was almost swollen shut. He took a lot more punches than pretty much anybody expected him to be taking against Juan Montiel. This fight was really chided by the media and a lot of boxing insiders as being a gross mismatch. People are going as far to say, fights like these are the reason that the Jake and Logan Pauls get notoriety in boxing world, because, good fights that people want to see don't get made. This was a very surprising event, a candidate for fight of the year even. And Juan Montiel really fought like a champion, and didn't look like he was going to go that way in the early rounds, but something was in him keeping him up. Something that was in him that was keeping him up, that wasn't keeping him up against Jaime Munguia earlier in his career. There was just tons of surprises in this fight.
Yeah, I'm rather blown away. I hope to see Montiel again at some point down the road. I mean, if it's even possible, just thinking about the fighter we just spoke about, Rosado. Get Rosado and Montiel in together, man. Those two, I think that would just be an entertaining matchup at this point.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That would be a tremendous fight. I think... that would be a very exciting fight. I haven't even thought of that fight.
Well, I'm curious to see. I want to know, like, everyone assumed, right, and I think it would be very fair to assume that after coming off a Derevyanchenko win, that this was going to be a blowout fight. I thought it was going to be finished at least within the first 4 rounds. Here, it went the entire distance to the scorecards. What happened with Charlo? Was it the dexterity of Montiel, or did he kind of overlook the preparation for this fight?
Yeah, there are a lot of different opinions on social media right now of whether or not Charlo overlooked Montiel, but in my opinion, the fact that he was able to take all those shots and still fight in close quarters in the late rounds, he had to be in good enough condition to just do that. I mean, taking that kind of withstood punishment, that kind of consistent punishment in the late rounds, and warding off a guy like Montiel. A lot of guys that wouldn't be in great shape would have a hard time doing just that. And Charlo was able to maintain and retain his championship despite that kind of adversity. So I'm not sure if it was a matter of him being unprepared. I think Charlo might just not be the biggest one-punch puncher at 160 that his brother is at 154 and that he might have been at 154. I think, like Angelo Leo, this guy is extremely strong, but he's not a one-shot puncher at 160 pounds. He's just a very strong fighter at 160. Against Sergey Derevyanchenko, I don't think he scored any knockdowns. He had Derevyanchenko in some trouble in spurts, but he really just outmuscled Derevyanchenko, and that's kind of where he fits in at 160 pounds. He's an extremely skilled fighter, Charlo, and he's very strong. Might not have the kind of one-punch power that people assume he does, given the fact that he's part of the Charlo Brotherhood, and there's so much eye-catching knockouts in their past. That might just not be who he is. The fact that he was taking so many shots, the defensive lapses, maybe he was overlooking Juan Montiel from a technical perspective. But I do think he was physically, ready for this fight, or else he might not have made it through that 12-round war. But the fact that he was taking all those shots, Charlo's not a bad defensive fighter. We've seen him in much better form against Derevyanchenko, so there might be some overlooking that went into that from a technical side.
Yeah, I guess it just speaks more to Montiel's preparation, I suppose. I guess being counted out early, he was just like, I got to go in and make a show. I got to earn my check, which he did. I mean, it was still, he got shut out on the cards, but that was that was just one exciting match.
Yeah, that was a tremendous fight. Unfortunately, he didn't win more rounds because obviously there's going to be no one calling for a rematch in a fight that one-sided. But that was as fun as it gets for a fight that was that clear on the scorecards. So that sums it up for the Texas element of last night. We go to Vegas in the Virgin Hotel. We had Isaac Dogbe with the near fight of the year candidate, his majority decision victory over Adam Lopez for the NABF featherweight title. Lopez nearly had him out of their weight, but Dogbe was able to hang on to his early lead and eke out a very narrow majority decision victory. What was your impression of this fight?
Dogbe, since hooking up with Hunter over there at the Headbangers Gym in D.C., technically has improved very well. Still I mean, you can tell, like, Tim Bradley even mentioned it, like, look at the guy. You can tell he's strong. It reminds me a little bit of a miniature Tim Bradley. But I was really impressed with Adam Lopez. Just able to, there were spurts where I'm just like, yo, he has Dogbe hurt, and I'm waiting for him to jump on those opportunities, but I couldn't tell if it was Dogbe. Was he actually really hurt or stunned, or was he just physically maybe exhausted? I mean, all those muscles need a lot of oxygen to perform, and they went the distance. So I was a little surprised to see maybe a Dogbe win, but like you said, he racked up points early on in the fight, right at the beginning rounds, really muscling through Lopez, trying to break him down to the body, catching a lot of hooks upstairs to the head. And Dogbe's defense, I really enjoyed the inside head movement that he was displaying.
Yeah, I was very impressed by his last round performance against Adam Lopez, because here I am thinking that Lopez has everything going for him to close the show with a late round knockout or a knockdown or something dramatic. And Dogbe, darn on, maybe won the last round, or really gave almost as good as he got in the last round, landing a lot of clean punches despite Lopez going for broke trying to close the show. A lot of Dogbe, as you mentioned, showed a lot of technical guile in the early rounds, winning maybe the first 5 rounds on most people's scorecard, and he showed a lot of guts late in the fight. But I do think he's a little small for 126 pounds. He kind of reminds me of maybe something like a Zuma Nelson, just with less physical strength. But yeah, he's gonna have a lot of difficulty fighting the top of the division. But I do see him maybe giving guys like maybe King Tug or Isaac Avalar, Mauricio Lara some good action at 126.
I guess whenever he does step up in that next level of the competition, I guess we're just going to have to see what happens. Like you said, it is tough to see him, I guess, go beyond an opponent like Lopez within this division because he is a little bit smaller. And those guys, if they're especially used to that at that weight because he's bumping up, maybe they'll just outwork him. I don't see them out-muscling him. Maybe. I mean, probably they will, because muscles don't win fights. But technically savvy, he's just a smaller dude. That's tough to see, I guess. I don't know. I have been enjoying seeing his development coming along, especially with those guys over at Headbangers. But Lopez did stun him a couple of times, and I'm not going to say that Lopez isn't the cream of the crop of the division. He's a really good fighter. I was appreciating him. I was waiting for him to use, I guess, more of his jab, but he got a little bit comfortable standing on the inside pocket with Dogbo, which Dogbo made those adjustments and, continued attacking the body, breaking Lopez down. But Lopez did resurge over here in the second half of the fight.
Yeah, I think Lopez could have done a little bit better cutting off the ring against Dogbe. He was kind of following Dogbe around in the late rounds, landing a lot of big shots, but not able to really trap Dogbe in the corner and put an exclamation mark on the fight as he probably wanted to do in the later rounds. But Dogbe gets the narrow decision over Adam Lopez. Great fight, probably elevated both of them, similar to Aaron Alameda and Angelo Leo. Another great fight this weekend. So we move into the main event, though, at the ESPN card in Vegas. And we had Naoya Inoue with the knockout in the third round of Michael Dasmariñas. Liver shots galore. That's really all that comes to mind when I think of this fight.
That guy is feeling it today. He's taking some extra ibuprofen, and I just feel bad whenever he's using the restroom.
Yeah. That is a good way to put it, because those liver shots, I think he was knocked down 3 times by 3 almost identical left hooks to the body against one of the biggest pound-for-pound body punchers in the sport today, Naoya Inoue. He looks sensational again. I really like the way Top Rank and ESPN are trying to promote Inoue, by the way. I think it's well-deserved. I know it could be a little cringeworthy watching ESPN and Top Rank break out the big guns trying to promote their fighters. I mean, they've done similar things for Teofimo Lopez, for Tyson Fury. But, I think Inoue is, when it's all said and done, going to be one of the more remembered fighters of this generation if they keep doing the right things and getting him the right fights. And him fighting the winner of Nonito Donaire and Casimero, a unification fight that was just recently announced yesterday. I think that's exactly what he needs to unify, get the undisputed bantamweight championship, and then move on to 122 for some of the big names we just talked about earlier. I think the sky's the limit for this guy.
Yeah, no, definitely. I have been really appreciating, like you said, it is sometimes a little bit cringe watching their promotions regarding Inoue, but it's definitely well needed. The guy is a pound for pound great. Just such a skilled technician. I just I'm hoping, this is me, fingers crossed, but we all know how boxing gets treated within the sports realm. It's like the stepchild that gets overlooked. I want to see Inoue not being pushed all the way to 12:30 in the morning, especially for us East Coast individuals, just because, when you're hyping up such a big fight, I would say the more hardcore, the more hardcore fans are willing to stay up to watch these fights, especially because we love watching Inoue perform. However, but for the general public, it's a little hard for them to, I think it's going to be a little hard to justify, like, why am I staying up till 12:30 in the morning to watch a guy from Japan fight?
Yeah. Especially for a division that most casual boxing fans overlook.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's been a lot of kickback in general of fights being pushed this late at night, and you can only promote a guy, the same way before it starts to get repetitive. They were pushing the monster narrative, the pound for pound narrative. There's a lot of different narratives you can push when it comes to Naoya Inoue, but really people just want to see him fight. I mean,
Yes.
The star quality lies within the ring with this guy. He's a tremendous fighter, offensively, defensively. The body shots are unbelievable. Let's get him on at a reasonable hour on a channel like ESPN. That's fine. It's a big microphone, but maybe 8 p.m., 9 p.m. 12:30 was pushing it. I am so happy, by the way, that Nonito Donaire has stepped in for Guillermo Rigondeaux to fight Casemiro to unify the titles, because I'm not saying I was unenthused by the Rigondeaux-Casemiro fight, but Donaire and Casemiro is going to be a tremendous fight, and I can't wait to see who comes out on top to fight Inoue. I know a lot of people want to see a rematch between Nonito Donaire and Inoue. I would really love to see Inoue against Casemiro, though. That fight was originally planned to take place last year before the pandemic knocked it out. That would be a tremendous fight as well. I guess we're just going to have to see who comes out on top in August.
I mean, we could probably have a winner circuit and a loser circuit, and I'm going to watch every single one.
Yeah. Yeah, these guys. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if Rigondeaux, let's say, for example, let's just say Nonito Donaire suffers a loss of Casemiro and they get Rigondeaux, or we can get a Nonito Donaire versus a Rigondeaux rematch. Would love to see that. Yeah,
that
just
would be
to
very
see.
Interesting.
Yeah, Rigondeaux, defeated Nonito Donaire, back in 2013?
2013 at 122, which is interesting that both guys, are looking pretty good recently at 118, despite it being 8 years later.
Yeah, and I think most ardent fans would, we're willing to see that rematch. Like, is the refreshed, now resurging Nonito Donaire, is he somehow going to maybe spark out Rigondeaux, who's now at 40 or 39? But I mean, if Rigondeaux were to face Casemiro, that's going to be an exciting matchup regardless, just because Casemiro's style. And then obviously we have the guy at the top of the division, Inoue, who, regardless of who he's fighting, I'm probably going to tune in to watch. But with any of these three guys, is going to be an exciting matchup, especially since Nonito Donaire is kind of wants that rematch with Inoue. They went the distance, so I'm curious to see, like, does Nonito Donaire have enough left in the tank to possibly upset the monster?
Yeah, I think I want to say his best shot has come and passed when he had Inoue literally seeing two of him in there with the broken orbital bone. But he fought tremendously in that fight, and fight no one thought he would. And it seems like a foregone conclusion that if he wins against Casemiro, there's no reason that all parties wouldn't come together to make this rematch for all four belts at 118. I think Inoue is destined to move up to 122 if and after he unifies 118. That's going to be a very interesting move up for him, in my opinion, because these guys at 122, they're a lot bigger than they are at 118 pounds. I mean, whether that's because they dehydrate to get down there, just bigger frame, whatever, it's going to get. I think it's going to get a lot more interesting at Inoue for Inoue trying to, keep up this pedigree or this caliber performance, just blowing guys away against guys that might be that much bigger than him.
I'm curious to see how well, the question is always, how well does it transfer, the power transfer up when you bump up to that next division, right? Yeah. And what's going for Inoue here isn't just that he has that like raw power, it's precision power.
Yeah.
I mean, as we just saw last night against Das Marinas, 3 body shots just took the guy out, right? That guy's suffering today, possibly. I hope he's doing okay. But whenever he bumps up to possibly the 122 division, will that carry along with him, or is he going to have to rely on his technical boxing abilities to get through those fights? Because, like you said, those guys are a lot bigger framed than he is. Yeah.
I mean, these were the same questions that were asked, coincidentally, of Nonito Donaire when he was moving up from 118 to 122 8-10 years ago. And these are the same things that he had to suffer with, fighting guys that were bigger, that could take his punches. And yeah, he had his first defeat at 122 pounds. I'm actually trying to think if he had lost earlier in his career in a one-off. But he suffered his most adversity after he moved up past that threshold where he was blowing guys out. We'll have to see if Naoya Inoue undergoes similar issues, but as you mentioned, that precision power can carry its way up irregardless of size. I think, there's a lot to look forward to in Inoue's career if he can make it out of 118 pounds with all the belts. But I guess I'll end it with this. There's a lot of talk about the pound-for-pound top spot. It's pretty indisputable that Inoue occupies one of the top 3 spots. Most lists have him slightly behind Canelo and Terrence Bud Crawford. What kind of pathway does he have to take successfully if he's going to get that pound-for-pound spot in your top spot, in your opinion?
I think bumping up to 122. I'm always nervous because they keep comparing Inoue to, as of right now, he's the next Manny Pacquiao. So the question is where is that threshold? Like, where is it to where, how high can he go before we hit the ceiling? And then unfortunately we see maybe a possible knockout just because he went up too much in weight. I'm afraid that, depending on how stringent people are being with their pound for pound lists, that he might need to go all the way up to 126 before people start saying that he's able to take that number 1 spot. I think if he blows everyone out at 122, he rightfully deserves that number 1 spot. But that's yet to be seen. All right.
I think Canelo's going to be a tough one to displace if Canelo keeps performing as he does. But honestly, I think he's ready to pick off Terrence Bud Crawford. I think, honestly, I would make a case for him. I could make a case for him being above Bud Crawford as it stands right now. I mean, certainly he's, his resume is right on par with Crawford, if not better. And, he has a lot more upside in terms of who he's going to be able to fight and able to fight to unify titles and move up and have more tremendous top fights. But yeah, I think the real challenge will be displacing Canelo Alvarez, especially with the way Canelo Alvarez is performing. But certainly if he cleans out 118 and 122 pounds, it's going to be very hard for anyone to top his accomplishments in his career. Naoya Inoue, the monster, just, hard not to get excited about this guy. Let's put him on at a reasonable hour and let's expose him to more of the casual fans, just more of sports fans, because this guy is special.
I'd like to see him fight at least one more time before the year is over. However, I could see him maybe not fighting until 2022. But, I guess we'll see. It depends on how Top Rank wants to move him. Right now, they're promoting him heavily, so it would be a real shame if they just let the steam die. And nothing happens with him.
Let's see Casemiro and Donaire. Let's see how much they take out of each other when they fight. I think there's a good chance they take a lot out of each other and aren't able to fight for the remainder of 2021, in which case Inoue is either inactive or he takes a stay busy fight. But I hope he does take a stay busy fight, because any fight he's in against, this guy's an entertainer, he's a performer, and he's not a risk that he's going to, suffer a defeat. He's going to stay steady in all likelihood, keep scoring knockouts that are going to enhance his image. But yeah, so that pretty much sums it up for a very, very active weekend at the fights. Unfortunately, Teofimo Lopez couldn't be part of that mix. He was supposed to be fighting George Kambosos. That fight has been postponed due to COVID, but tremendous action. So happy that you were able to be with us today, Jeff, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I think if July doesn't pan out, even though it will, I think we're going to have so many awesome fights to call, definitely in August.
Absolutely. All right, that about sums it up for this episode of the Fight City Podcast. Check us out at thefightcity.com for more exciting, exclusive content.
I expect a tough, clean fight. Protect yourself at all times. Any questions from the challenger?